This afternoon, we're going to be touching on some of the news from the last couple weeks. Haven't done one of these news roundup streams in a while, so I thought it'd be a good time to catch up on everything that's been going on, since it would be hard to make a video on everything. And of course, returning one of my favorite streaming partners, American Ostrakon. Ostrakon, thanks for coming on, man.
As always, it's a pleasure to be here. And yep, it's I always look forward to doing our kind of weekly roundups of the news.
Yeah, we haven't got to do one a little bit, and like I said, so much has happened. I haven't been able to keep up with like different videos. So always good to do one of these roundups. Lets us touch on a bunch of issues all at once. But one theme that's definitely going to be part of the last couple weeks has been, of course, new variants coming out, new lockdowns, just different things related to the coof. So let's go ahead and start with the Omicron variant. So, of course, last couple weeks we've had the sudden discovery of this new variant that is supposed to be, of course, the next big thing. It's the next big wave. And as you would expect, of course, it's immediately being used to, uh, you know, facilitate a lot of narratives. A lot before we knew anything about it, before we had any data about it, we immediately had the media writing articles about how it was going to affect people who had been vaxxed but not boosted. So the boosting was a big part of this. Also, interestingly enough, this variant seemed to have many of the same effects as the side effects of the vaccine possibly could have. Again, all this is for YouTube out there. All of this is just what has been going around. Not making any particular claims, but very interesting that it felt like while there was a big media push on this variant, and we saw a lot of different news outlets doing panic stories about it, it felt like the public in general just has fatigue. I did not see outside of the kind of the usual suspects, any real reaction. I think for a lot of people, I didn't hear people in my daily life, people at work or anything, talking about the new variant and all the things that needed to be done.
Yeah, it's burnout. Like you can only claim it's a crisis for so long before people just stop listening and stop caring. So regardless of the reality of this new variant or how contagious or not contagious it is, people just don't care anymore. They're tired of it. um, we have sacrificed years at this point, catering to all of these rules, and changes in our lives, and just at some point, and it's kind of a nice thing in a way, but at some point people are just going to continue to live their lives the best they can and aren't going to continue to be affected by, oh, we're on variant Omega now. Okay, sure. And unless there's some sort of serious change where like the death rate spikes significantly, or, there's an actual, some sort of significant event, the optics on it at this point is just like, this is something we have to live with, and we're going to go about our lives. Except for, of course, the most extreme proponents, that are pushing this for, let's be honest, political and social change, and they don't really care one way or the other about the actual medical issues involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, it's like I said, I just wonder how long they think that that's going to work for them. At this point, it feels like all the people who are ever going to feel the urgency to comply have already reached that point. And I guess if you just keep harassing people, they hope to eventually break down whatever is left of the population that is disagreeing with them. But I don't know. It just is, like I said, it's so tiring. It's so people just don't seem to respond the same way. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are still the nutballs out there. There are still the absolute true believers who just absolutely panic every single time the media spins a new narrative about whatever variant or vax or booster, and they'll always jump on every one of these things. And unfortunately, a number of them are in charge. So if you're in areas where uh, you know uh, lockdowns are prevalent, mask mandates are prevalent, then you're gonna get a lot of this, unfortunately. But I feel like there's diminishing returns on the percentage of the population that's going to listen to this anymore. And we see how ridiculous some of the narratives that come out of it is. There's actually, I'm trying to remember, I should have grabbed the screenshot, but there was some outlet, Vice or Slate or somebody, maybe even the Washington Post, who did a story basically saying that American Trump fans, like some unvaxxed, MAGA boomer in Alabama, was the person responsible. They are the crowd responsible for creating the Omicron variant in Africa. That's the level of delusion we're on, and how far they're willing to try to push this stuff.
I mean, we had a discussion about this, about how nonsense can be powerful,
Yeah,
and
it's very
that,
true.
like, it doesn't matter. The facts don't really matter anymore, and it's just whether or not you're willing to parrot what people in positions of power are telling you is true. So, I mean, does the Omicron variant exist? Probably. Is it going to affect certain people, or are people going to get infected because of this variant? Yes, but we've been dealing with it for so long now that the boogeyman fear of each new variant is starting to fade. Now, the concern there, I would think, is that what usually happens in these cases is then they ratchet up either restrictions or ratchet up, um, they're going to ratchet up the fear in some way. I don't know how they're going to do it at this point, but they're going to try and make it as dire as possible, in order to get people's attention back. I mean, they've done the same thing with gun control for years, right? They continue to ratchet up, the effects of violent crime any way they can, and to increase the optics of it in order to get people to pay attention to it when it really doesn't affect most people on a daily basis.
Yeah, and this might just become another perpetual tool of fear in their bag, right? This is
It's another one, right? It's gun control, it's abortion rights,
It's climate change.
it's climate
Yeah.
change, and now it's COVID, right? It's just one more tool in the bag of political operatives at this point.
And I've had a lot of criticism for kind of the little bit of the mainstream conservative or boomer conservative optimism about how in the end, America's love of freedom will save them and that kind of thing. And I'm still willing to short that on a lot of issues. But I will say this: looking at what other countries are doing, looking at how crazy other countries are, even with the amount of people who have bent the knee in the US, there still does seem to be something to that willingness to resist that just doesn't exist in a lot of other countries. Many countries who a lot of Americans probably felt were relatively close to us in values or, history, and that kind of thing. And so there is still something of that American spirit there that I think does slow, and make it difficult for the same kind of fear and restrictions to be put into place, as opposed to some other countries that we're seeing around the world.
Yes, I'm sure we're going to get into that further in our conversation today.
Yeah, yeah. So the next thing that I was going to have on here is, we have a flurry of countries that have been increasing their lockdowns across the Western world. Some were in response to Omicron, some were just in response to general, COVID levels and things in their countries. The most interesting one, the one that's probably got the most controversy around it, would be Australia. We already did a whole episode with the good old boys that you ended up joining about kind of the Australia situation. Things have only gotten worse since then, to the point where Australia has been rounding up large chunks of its Aboriginal population and other population groups that are either out of range of medical care or labeled more likely to be infected, or are less likely to receive the vax or have been brought into some kind of contact. And they are keeping them in what are being, it's a concentration camp. It's
They are.
really all there is to it.
They're being kept in, away from the population against their will, in quarantine, in camps. I mean, it's a camp.
Yeah, and that's the thing that was so crazy is, there's a lot of theoretically, you know, center right or centrist Australian voices who are very aggressively calling Americans who characterized the detention facilities like this. They said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're being ignorant. These are all voluntary. No one's here against their will. Everyone here is having a good time." It got to the point where Claire Lehman, who is the editor of Quillette, excuse me, and is one of the people who popularized the kind of the intellectual dark web, the IDW and that sphere. She was out there sharing pictures of residents of the camp, like in bikinis and stuff, like women sharing pictures of themselves on Instagram and saying, "See, look, if this was a really involuntary, would they be, would women be taking pictures of themselves in this kind of scenario?" But then just a couple days ago, we started getting Australian news broadcast clips, and they're just sitting there, talking about how, some Aborigines just happened to have broken out of the quarantine camp last night and had to be like hunted down and hauled back. And they're just talking about this like it's, like it's a funny little human interest piece. Like, can you believe they climbed the barbed wire fence and, went out for a drink at the pub? It's for a group of people who had been insisting that this was entirely voluntary and had nothing to do with actually detaining these people against their will. That storyline pretty quickly broke down as soon as any information got out about what's actually going on there.
I mean, that's a pretty succinct assessment of that situation. You don't send police officers to forcibly put people back into quarantine camps if it's all voluntary. So they can have whatever, puff piece is like, "Oh no, it's all fine. We're all hanging out at the beach and singing songs, and everyone's enjoying their stay here." But when the reality of the situation is people who attempt to leave are forcibly placed back into that camp for no other reason other than, they potentially have some sort of sickness, or maybe not. It's a detention camp. There's no other way to slice it.
Yeah, and this goes hand in hand with a lot of other tactics that we've seen Australian police and government officials using. They've been giving law enforcement the right to go into people's social media, change what is being posted there. They're able to, we have footage of unmasked fathers and mothers being tackled in parks with their children next to them. It's for a There's a lot of footage of Australian police and law enforcement getting pretty extreme pretty quickly with non-violent people. And so this propaganda about how these are just basically summer resorts where people are voluntarily staying until they can figure out what to do with them, that was always going to fall flat for anyone who's paying attention. But I guess they're counting on a lot of people not paying attention.
It's I never thought it would be Australia would be the first one to go full police state, but here we are. I've said that a few times. I was expecting like England or South Africa to go first, but here we are,
Well, South
Australia.
Africa can't go full police state because they just don't have the infrastructure to do it. If they could, they probably would, but they can't control their population. So
it's I mean, I think the incident that just kind of chills me to the core when it comes to Australia is when you had the protests in front of the Victoria War Memorial in Melbourne, which is basically, for all intents and purposes, hollowed ground. It's like a war memorial slash monument to those who have died in the service of the Australian military, and to have veterans being shot at with rubber grenades, like rubber bullets and sting ball grenades and whatnot by the Australian police. At that point, it's just like, okay, got it. I've kind of written off that country at this point.
yeah, and while they have some of the most extreme examples with the actual detention facilities, obviously other countries are often going the same way. We had Austria a few weeks ago, I believe, at this point, start their lockdown of the unvaxxed, specifically. So specifically targeting anyone who has not been vaccinated for full lockdown in their home, and then I think if I saw this correctly, Austria expanded that then to just the whole country. The whole country went back into lockdown. Germany, I think, also instituted a unvaxxed only lockdown this week. So we're seeing a lot of targeting in these countries, specifically of locking down those that are not vaxxed. And if I read correctly, certain parts of Canada are now restricting entry into things like grocery stores. So we're really seeing that push.
So, I mean, this was always going to be the end result, right? It was going to be encourage people to get the vaccine, and then they were just going to keep ratcheting it up at that point, to the point where you will not be able to function in society unless you're vaccinated. And I guess what annoys me is the whole time they're just like basically promising is like, no, as long as we can reach a certain percentage, it's fine. As long as we can do this, as long as we can do that. But the real fact is they're going to have this measure of control over your life, or you're not going to be able to participate in a meaningful way in that society. I mean, look at the required vaccine mandates for the United States. The federal government is the largest employer in the United States, and if you're not vaccinated, you cannot work. So yes, okay, fine. You can choose to be unvaccinated, but we're going to make it unrealistic for you to be able to participate in society in any meaningful way unless you are.
Yeah, and we got a super chat here from Lucas. Thank you for your donation, man. He says Austria will have a vaccine mandate starting February. Those who don't get vaccinated will be fined, might go to jail. Germany will most likely follow. And yeah, I feel like you're probably going to see a lot of countries go that direction. Unfortunately, you're probably going to start seeing direct legal mandates, fines, jail time. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of stopping this, or it doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in stopping this in many countries. That's why I said, it's as much guff as I'll give, kind of the boomer optimism in America. This does at least seem to be far less taste for this kind of thing. Other countries rolling over even faster in stunning speed, really.
It's and then it won't be enough that everyone gets vaccinated. Then it'll be how many boosters that you've actually received.
Yep.
And it's just going to continue on. And this level of control is permanent, right? We're not going to go back. This is a new permanent level of control over the populations, right? We've restricted international movement. We've restricted internal movement within countries. They've stopped their ability to go shopping or buy things or work unless you get it. You will comply or you will not be able to function. That's where we're at.
Well, and of course, increased monitoring, and this is a big part of it, right?
It is.
There's beyond. This is why it's always dangerous to only get stuck in kind of the first order consequences, right? Because a lot of people want to get stuck in the science, and fair enough. Like people want to debate the efficacy of vaccines and percentages of deaths, and all of that is important. But it's really the second and third order effects that are the things that are probably driving this for most governments. Most governments are looking at the fact that it's going to increase their sphere of control, as I've talked about. You guys might have seen the juvenile videos. What you uh, totalitarian control is an arms race. Once one state has levee en masse, everybody else needs to be able to create a massive army, or they're going to lose the arms race. And so with the ability to track, control, and trace every citizen in a country, as soon as one government has the ability to do that, it behooves every other government to secure that power over their population if they can, because they're only going to fall further behind in kind of this government centralization arms race if they don't have the ability to do that. So many of them probably believe in it to some extent too, but the gaining of power is a big motivator. And why waste an excuse to centralize as much power over your population as you can while you can?
I mean, I agree. This is the perfect jumping off point to a social credit system,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
that's where we're headed. I mean, we have used COVID as a way to. I mean, we already have informal social credit systems anyway, but this is a move towards having the respective governments of these countries have pretty significant control over the movements of their populations, the awareness of their finances. I mean, it's going to be. I mean, I was reading an article the other day about how intelligence organizations are complaining it's so much more difficult for their agents to move around between countries because of all the requirements and restrictions as far as travel and whatnot. So basically, they're complaining that they can't move clandestinely between countries and do their job because there is too much everyday scrutiny on travel.
Yeah, it's an interesting side effect. Well, and that's the other thing, right? Is one, I not to look for silver linings in I think what is a pretty thoroughly dark cloud here, but at some point they might overburden things to the point where kind of the increase in globalization necessarily slows down, right? Because shipping things, moving things across borders, uh, you know, uh, all of this stuff necessarily halts. And obviously, this is going to hurt average people first because they're the ones who, in many ways, are most dependent on this immediate inventory management that just in time kind of economics has created. But this can also slow down that pace, and that might be an unintended consequence. Though it's very likely that those in power will find ways around that first. That will be their highest priority.
I mean,
But it is an interesting byproduct.
they're using the logistics crisis that's coming up as to further their agenda in other ways.
Right.
Right now, we're just using the issues of logistics as a justification to switch how people eat and what they can consume, and increasing the prices on the goods that they deem not socially acceptable. So, this is. I feel like um, every net negative that we're running into at this point, they're just using to further agenda.
Yeah. Well, and like obviously we're seeing finally, U.S. travel restrictions. It looks like they're going to be requiring testing whether you're vaccinated or not. So that's interesting. The vaccinations will not protect you from travel restrictions. I believe they entirely shut down travel from South Africa, which I had been informed was extremely racist and dangerous under Trump, but Of course, media is going to give an instant pass to Joe Biden. To be fair, that's exactly what you should do, of course, when you hear that a dangerous disease is coming from a specific country. But obviously, we're not going to do the whole hypocrisy thing here. We know where that comes from, but just should be noted for the record.
I mean, at this point, the hypocrisy between the left and the right and what they can actually do is just, that's just life.
Right. All right. So Matthew Ivy, I want to grab this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now, but I wanted to grab it so I don't lose your super chat. I appreciate your donation and I don't want to forget it. I'm going to probably talk about this more at the end, but let me at least address it real quick. Since I have had a lot of questions about this and I don't want to lose your super chat. So not to bring up Twitter, but why does Keith Woods have an issue with you? Feel like every post you make is followed by wig not counter signalers. So here's the thing. I've never spoken to Keith Woods. I don't know Keith Woods. I've seen some of his videos. I liked a few of them I saw. Some of them were kind of boring, but I mean, he has a big audience. He's got a lot of people watch him. I don't know why he doesn't like me. I don't really care. That's the thing I blocked him a while back because it was just like a constant stream of negative and stuff. But apparently, I don't know if he's like getting screenshots for somebody. He still apparently comments. I never see his stuff, so I don't really know until someone like specifically lets me know that he's saying something. I didn't get into this for drama. I don't find punching right productive. I don't want to be some low rent Real Housewives star. That's not why I started doing YouTube or Twitter. And so I just find this stuff really boring. It's good for attention, right? Like it's a lot of people do drama channels. A lot of people grow their Twitter through drama. So it's definitely does numbers, right? So if I just wanted to build clout, that's probably a good way to like get eyeballs and stuff. But I just have no interest in doing it. If you like Keith stuff, you should watch it. If you don't like my stuff, then don't watch it. I don't really have a lot of interest in feeding people's drama or attention. And I think we just have bigger things to deal with. There's a lot of people who are friendly with Keith, like Morgoth, who I am friendly with. Me and Morgoth get along great. So I don't feel like there's a lot of animosity with that community in general. But I just have no interest in wading into internet drama and making it a thing. I can't stop others from doing it. I'm not going to waste my breath doing it, but I'm just not interested in playing that game. But we'll probably eventually get around to the issue. That's my last thing I've got on here. The Patriot Front march. We'll talk about that quickly before we go, just because a lot of people got their hackles up about it yesterday. So we'll touch on it before we go. But I'm gonna stay on our schedule for now. But thank you again for the super chat. Constantine Martelli says, I thought the Anglosphere was doomed for a while, but seeing it in person is a complete punch in the gut. Yeah, I mean, obviously, very difficult to watch a lot of countries that you thought of as friends or that you respected kind of go crazy. Obviously, the fact that they're all in the Anglosphere is part of the problem. The interconnection, the way that the American cathedral basically drives the narrative, and in the Anglosphere, and in many cases, other Anglosphere nations are actually more fervently adherent to that propaganda than the Americans. Means that we see kind of this like purity spiral cascade across the Anglosphere and a lot of this stuff. At the same time, as always, I just encourage people not to get down personally. I know that's difficult when a lot of countries are making this very personal for you. Obviously, if you're living under these restrictions, but there's just not going to be a lot of direct action change, unfortunately, with some of this stuff. Do your best to be as free as you can, get to places where you're going to have to deal with the least of this as possible. But as much as you can, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Don't let the closing of the gyms or the closing of the churches or whatever make you unable to work out or spend time with God or keep in touch with your family as much as possible. Do what you can in those situations.
Yeah, that's good advice. I've been spending a lot of time at the gym, so that's been fun. um, yeah, I think we always come back to that assessment, where at the end of the day, worry about the things that you have control over, which is your physical life, your spiritual life, and your finances, and the rest is just going to have to work itself out for the most part. It doesn't mean you should be unaware of what's going on, but just like the old saying, charity starts at home, self improvement starts at home, and worry about the things in your life that you have some measure of control over. And I do it like everyone else.
Yep, absolutely. We see Judge Caligula Bushman. It's quite the name there. Sadly, we've seen resistance give the governments more power and normie support. You saw this with Rodham riots, people support shooting live ammo into crowds of protesters without care. Yeah, this is something we're going to get into probably when we talk about the Patriot Front March. But people need to understand the utility to the regime of symbols, and you don't want to play the game that they want you to play. Now, this doesn't mean that you give them your submission. This doesn't mean that you give them your compliance when you can avoid it, like minimum levels of compliance to continue, that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that you just do nothing, but it does mean you need to be thoughtful about what you do. Just amassing people in the streets in general, we've just been fed this story of change from the bottom up, that you just get a crowd in the streets and that's what changes things. But the popular revolution is largely a myth, and if you see crowds in the streets that don't have government sanction to be there, they're usually paying quite the cost. And today, in today's world, with the ability of technology and other things to track and to punish, the cost can be very high very quickly. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on that now. We'll probably get into it more when we talk about the events of DC yesterday. But I just want to touch that this is true across many different disciplines, and it's a very painful lesson that people are excuse me, are going to have to learn. Let's see. I think we caught up with super chats for now. Okay, so back to our schedule. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the SUV of peace we had in Wisconsin a few weeks ago. Obviously, after the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, not too long after, we had an SUV that was driven into the crowd at a Christmas parade in I think it was Waukesha or something like that, and it's a city in Wisconsin, and it ended up injuring, I think it was something like 60 people and killing like 10, including like a young child and a group called the Dancing Grannies. I mean, just horrific. I mean, really brutal. And the media immediately did the same thing that we see them do in Europe when Waukesha. Thank you. Yes, I thought I knew it was something like that. Thank you. But the media did something that we've seen them do pretty routinely in Europe when it comes to attacks by Muslim extremists. They started blaming it on the vehicle. First, we got the story that that an SUV had done all this. Anytime the attack was referenced, it was the SUV that was at fault. And then we started getting early cover stories about how actually this guy had been fleeing the scene of another crime, and that the contact was entirely incidental. We later learned, of course, that was entirely false and fabricated. The media clearly got out in front of the story in attempting to bury this right away. But we can see the narrative get buried in real time. And it's amazing that right after all this talk about how Kyle Rittenhouse, the white supremacist, was just mowing down Black Lives Matters protesters, we actually saw a real supremacist of the wrong color mowing people down like in a vehicle. And the fastest, the speed at which the media felt the need to bury this was insane.
I mean, the media has no integrity anymore. It doesn't matter. It is a direct puppet of progressive politics, and it's at this point articles like this that completely, I tell you, it's one of the nice aspects of or the good aspects of every individual having their own camera and a recording device on them pretty much all the time in the form of their phone, is that you're going to end up getting better reporting off of people who are actually at these events or at these attacks than you are going to get it from the media itself. It was really funny. There was I think it was posted on Twitter, but it may have been it was either Twitter or 4chan, but basically this guy was talking about, in the time I look at the mainstream media and I see that there's been some sort of incident involving an SUV and somebody, and we're not really clear of all the details. And he goes on 4chan 5 minutes later, and he knows the name of the individual who's committed the crime, exactly the location, how many people are injured, or how many people are killed, and the address of the individual involved. So weaponized autism does definitely have its uses. But I guess the good aspect of that is it's a double-edged sword, in that anyone who's willing to make the slightest bit of effort is going to be able to get other interpretations of events other than what's being publicly announced. That being said, a lot of people don't even dig that far, so it definitely still has its uses as a way to manipulate stories, which is exactly what's been. I mean, because they're relatively close together, these two events, the Kyle Rittenhouse event and the this, I don't even remember the name of the individual. See, that's how much it's been taken off the public record. I know his name's out there, but it's, every single article is got Kyle Rittenhouse name front and center, and this guy's his name is often buried in the article. But it just goes back to where does what side these two people are on politically. Obviously one is very left leaning and one is more right leaning, and they're going to promote the one story because that's the way the media wants to have it. It's just not surprising to me anymore. Like, of course it's going to be this way,
Right.
It's just like this is just we have a one party media, official media in this country. It's got its talking points. It's going to produce those said talking points in support of our current political power. And if you want to dig deeper, well, the good news is if you want to spend 5 minutes of your own time and do the slightest amount of research on the internet, you're going to find out what's actually going on, or at least have a different interpretation of the events. So that's the good news. The bad news is most people aren't going to take those 5 minutes.
Yeah, and it's a weird line to walk because it's, in some way, you want to be able to touch on it. You feel like this is a lie, this is an obvious double standard, this is a violation of everything that these people are supposed to be doing. At the same time, you want to avoid the conservative trap of just being like, hypocrisy,
Imagine if things were
hypocrisy.
different.
Yeah, if only things had been different, right?
Right.
If only the media played by the rules.
Well, they don't, and that's life.
Right. So there's this weird line. It's like, how much do you focus on this? I think you have to some extent. You can't just let it go uncommented on, because then the majority of people who are already just swallowing this have no breadcrumbs to the truth, right? But you also don't want to spend endless hours on yet another video about media hypocrisy. I guess, and I think the interesting thing now is the willingness of the media to not just obscure facts, but make bold-faced lies early on in instances, in cases, and then walk them back slowly months later, knowing that the impact will have already the damage will already have been done. So, for instance, with Kyle Rittenhouse, most major media commentators still thought he had shot black people when he was protecting himself, even though everyone involved was white. And so I think when they get a lie out early enough, they're willing to just take whatever the hit of the to the credibility is. They can always walk it back later and say, "Oh well, I mean, really, it was this." But by then, the damage is done with the populace. What the populace cares about is what's in the headline in the first day or two, not what they go back and fix later on. So um, I think what's interesting. I think the interesting development is how clearly and blatantly. I think the first person I saw out there was like SC Cup from CNN, just lying, just completely. Oh yeah, the criminal was fleeing, and had no intention of being in there and had no motive. When we found out that actually the criminal in question had a long history of being a black supremacist, being very vocal about not just support for organizations like BLM, but actively, saying very aggressive things towards white people in general. Clearly had the possibility of motive that was just immediately buried, and thanks to the reporting work of a few people who were really getting the job done, Pedro Gonzalez, who has been on the show and who I'm friendly with, he did a good bit of reporting on his own and released a lot of information on the background of the assailant and the DA involved. Apparently, the assailant had been released on something like $500 or $1,000 bail, even though he had a long history of violent crimes. He had shot his cousin. He had hit a woman and run over someone at some point. This is a guy who had a long history of incarceration, was accused of multiple crimes, had warrants in other states at the time that this happened and the time the bail was set. And so it looks like bail reform, which unfortunately has been supported by many Republicans along with Democrats, including President Trump, played a big part in making sure that this guy was on the street and was able to do what he did.
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
It's like I said before, it's just because of the relatively close time between these two events. It makes for a good juxtaposition of left and right yet again. But uh, like you say, you got to cover it, but it's nothing new at this point.
Yeah, and I hate that is the case. I don't want to be numb to this, but at some point you need to say, okay, this happens now. How do we operate in that reality? Super chat from I'm going to say this wrong, Gulsher Qureshi. Trump media and technology group discussion. Yeah, man, I don't know if you're the one who mentioned that on Twitter, but I've got that down there. I don't have a lot to say on it, but we'll touch on it before we go. So don't worry. I did look into that some, and we'll talk about that more near the end here. So the next thing I wanted to ask, especially with you on, is we had a flurry of really panicked news articles and blue check people out there because Ron DeSantis is secretly building a personal guard to assault like Georgia and free Florida from the tyranny of the American empire. What is going on with Ron DeSantis? Is he actually building his own private army? And when will Caesar march?
Well, yeah, just based upon what I've read in the article, he's asking for something around $2 million and approximately 200 volunteers to assist with state-based weather crisis or any sort of any sort of like forest fires or hurricane relief and things like this. So my guess is probably just going to be drawing from like volunteer firemen and and like reserve police deputies and potentially like military reservists or veterans to create a sort of, from what I can understand, a quick reaction force that they can call upon across the state to say, hey, we need 50 people here to help out and support local emergency services in the event of a weather disaster of some kind. Which, by the way, it's so like a state-based militia, which is separate from the National Guard, which is the state militia. Um, Although if you look at the Supreme Court, everyone in the state is technically part of the militia. Um, it's basically another emergency services response force that answers directly to the governor, just like the National Guard does. I don't see how approximately 200 volunteers and approximately $2 to $3 million worth of funding is going to be some sort of threat to the stability of Florida or the United States. A lot of states actually have programs very similar to this. State militia that's falls on like state volunteer militia that serve a similar function. This is not the first state to have this. In essence, it's a non-article. They don't like DeSantis. They're gonna use any sort of evidence that he's attempting to consolidate power in this very Roman-esque way to paint him in a bad light. But it's I think the whole thing is kind of a non-issue. And as you've seen, it hasn't gotten much traction in the media after the first little article or two. So I think it's pretty much dead and buried at this point. What do you think?
I think that we'll see at least 50 to 70 million Florida men on swamp boats going across the Potomac, and raising the flag high. I think they are symboling the strike force as we speak. Yeah, no, as
They're getting some volunteers together. They'll wear some sort of military-esque uniform and
yeah.
they'll help out with hurricane relief. Like this is all this is. But okay.
Yeah, as always, if only the Republicans were as based as the insane fever dreams of the media wish they were. Um,
Yeah, if
but no,
only.
yeah, no, it's I think Rick Wilson, or yeah, I think it was Rick Wilson was on there saying, and this is when we saw the beginning of Florida's nuclear program. It's like, oh, God willing, right? Like,
Don't tempt me.
right. but yeah, no, I do not. Sadly, I do not think we'll see Caesar Ron sweeping across the South and getting the band back together. But it is always interesting to watch the media melt down over the smallest thing that they think might signal this, which maybe tells you they're more, maybe they are more scared about it than people think. But
What we have discussed, when you move from soft power to more hard power, the power itself can become more brittle, right? So any sort of perceived threat to power, which is what they're framing this as, right? This is a legitimate threat to the sovereignty of the United States. Well, it's not, but the mere fact that they're even giving it any attention at all shows that they believe it is. So, in and of itself, that is interesting to talk about and consider.
Yeah, it's so hard to know because they now will accuse literally anything as being a threat to our sacred democracy and the future of America. Everything is a existential threat at this point. Republicans breathing is an existential threat to the country at this point. So it's hard to know what they're really worried about and what they're there's no governing the hyperbole on the left. That the gates are open at this point. So you're it's hard to gauge what is actually something they're concerned about and what if they're just used to going through the rhetoric at this point. But our next one here, the Trump social media. So this was what the commenter was bringing up earlier, the Trump Media and Technology Group. So Donald Trump apparently has accumulated about $1 billion in funding for his proposed social media. If I remember, it's called like Truth or something along that, like Truth Media, something like that. And it's going to be his own social media platform. Uh, Obviously, that's a lot of money. So it's a real company, I guess. No surprise that Donald Trump can raise funding for companies, right? That's something he's going to be able to do without the presidential name. So that seems easy enough. I guess the question is, does it make any difference? And I'll be honest, I'm always skeptical of social media, new social media groups. I want there to be a successful one. It's not that I think that you shouldn't try this or that it can't in some way at some point be done. But I guess there's a couple problems. The first one is always just logistically. We've already seen that companies like what was the one with a P that all the conservatives went to? Um, Trying to remember the name of it. Anywhere there's that social media one that got set up, and like all your old favorites that had been banned off of Twitter and everything started popping up on this new social media site, Parlor. That was it. This new social media site, Parlor, was popping up everywhere, and this was going to be the new right wing, social media, and it was going to take everything by storm. And then with January 6th, they just gave them some kind of license to immediately shut down their services, take them off all the app stores, shut down their servers. And on top of this, there's a lot of concern about security issues with the site and everything. And I think we see this a lot, unfortunately, with new social media companies. Parler is probably the most successful launch we've seen, and even with that launch, you just don't have a lot of the essentials. You get pushed off of the technology. The app stores don't want you because they're immediately being accused of harboring extremists. The hosting server companies don't want you. The payment processors don't want you. So you're immediately losing all that stuff. Now, there are platforms like Gab, and Gab is a platform that went really far out of its way to do everything it can to make itself uncountable. So I think you have to like start with just having Gab's infrastructure, right? Like just having that level of infrastructure that's hard to attack. But even if you have that, the problem is, what is the utility of that, right? Because these things are going to notoriously be right wing echo chambers, and there is utility in having a right wing echo chamber. There is a utility in having a safe place people can land, talk to each other, and not have to worry about getting banned off of. Where even if you get banned off Twitter, even if you get taken off whatever, you've still got this home base. So there's something very valuable to that, but it doesn't have the reach of something like Twitter, because the value of Twitter is it is the public square. That's the value of Facebook. That's the value of Instagram, is that there are so many users, that these are in so many ways the default platforms for certain segments of society, that things can go viral. Like really basic stuff can get hundreds of thousands of views out of nowhere. And that ability to go viral, that ability to cross out of your own chamber and into the wider consciousness, is what gives social media its power. So I think there's a value in having a place where like right wingers can talk and not have to worry about getting banned constantly. But at the same time, I don't understand. I guess Trump's platform is just going to be Gab for boomers, right? Is that its value? I guess so. I guess it's good for boomers to have a Gab, but I don't understand what it's going to do outside of that, because even if it's able to avoid all the issues of being taken down, taken off stores, and everything else because of Trump's name and his cachet and all that, I still don't know how it's going to secure an audience outside of just, that core group of people.
I mean, that's it in and of itself. You're not going to get people who aren't already having those particular political views joining that service to begin with. So very few people are just going to wander into a Trump-based social media empire without already having a pretty set political view. It's okay. I mean, it's nice to have another option as far as social media out there. I don't see it being particularly effective. I don't see Trump as being. He's not the prince who was promised, right?
Yeah.
He was a blue dog Democrat who was really not doing anything particularly on the face of it. Like he wasn't even that big of a threat in any particular way, and they chewed him up and spit him out because he's the opposition party. So sure, okay, you can have a Trump-based social media platform, and there will be a small percentage of people who believe in that message, who are going to use that service. But okay, like I just don't see it really taking off or having any meaningful impact. It's nice that it's
Yeah.
there. It's another option, but it's Trump has been pillared through mainstream media and the internet to the point where I don't think he's really relevant anymore.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I still think Trump in some ways is a shelling point for the right, even though his actual utility as a leader is probably, suspect. He's still, I was talking to a boomer at the gym uh, a couple days ago, and Trump just walks on water for these people, and you can say what you want about him, but a lot of these people who otherwise didn't understand there was a problem with politics are willing to jump on board with Trump. So he is a good rallying point. He does seem to just command something from a lot of people, and that is a magic all on its own. You can't discount that. Hopefully, if he's handed those kind of reins, he does something more significant than he did last time. But and I would never tell anyone not to come, out and come up with these new platforms because, for instance, Odyssey. If you guys subscribe to my Odyssey channel, I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to follow all of your favorite creators, even the ones who are angry with me on Odyssey, because it
Who could be
does.
angry with you? Come on.
Who knows? But I do think that Odyssey is a great platform. It automatically takes content that you make from other platforms and puts it on there. So, it's very convenient for creators. As someone who tried to get, gosh, what's the name of that terrible? BitChute. Trying to get BitChute work is just, it's just gross. So having another alt tech platform that's actually reliable and is hard for people to take down is great. I think that's probably a safe home for people to back up their work, even though it doesn't have a lot of mainstream appeal now. At least it's going to be there. They do need to work on their mobile app. Their mobile app is garbage, but it is a good service. So there is good work being done in those alternative arenas, and I would never tell someone not to try. But there is one of the things of social media is there is a diminishing returns thing, right? The utility of social media is everyone's on it. So the more right-wing social medias or alt tech social medias you have, and people are spread across them, the worse it is. That's one of the problems that I have with using another platform besides Twitter. Do you go on Gab? Do you go on Telegram? Do you go on Minds? Like, where's your audience going to be? Will they be there in 5 years? Are they going to be somewhere else? You can try to be on everything, but that's difficult too, especially trying to keep up a significant presence. Everybody's got a different social media posting style, but mine is kind of victory by volume, and it's hard to do that on like 7 platforms simultaneously. You can get them to mirror posts and stuff, but it's not quite the same as actually being there and interacting. So it's just one of those things that I don't think there's an easy answer for right now, but I'm never going to discourage people from going out there and trying to make something like that work. Just be very aware of of the problems, and I guess at least Trump has the funding to possibly get that done, if nothing else. Let's see, but Bolero 393 does his once a stream attempt to draft Ostrakon to the throne. Ostrakon, I'm going to keep calling you out for leadership. Step up form and claim the throne and lead your subjects to freedom from the pause. Ostrakon, will you take this crown that has been handed to you once again by Mark Antony?
I'll go back to what I always say. It's I prefer the Cincinnatus option. When I'm needed, I'm sure I can be recalled out of service or recalled back to service. But I'm tired of fighting wars, man. Like I seriously, I want to go someplace with a lot of sun and get my feet licked by beautiful women. That's my goal in life right now. Really, like that's like I'm not even joking. Like somewhere with a Mediterranean climate and a decent coffee shop, and like I'm going with like 3 women. I think that's enough. Any more than 3 is just it's a harem, and then there's like all these it's and the neighbors are going to start asking questions and whatnot. But
I congratulate you on your conversion to Mormonism. And
no, I just it's I you know what, I'm not going to say it's not within the realm of possibility, but there would have to be some pretty massive changes before anything like that would happen. But no, the battle plan is hang out on some sort of Mediterranean coast somewhere. So there's no running from this. I know, but like, give me a few more years, guys. Come on.
So let me live in this delusion.
Like, can I get like 3-4 years to live out my fantasies, and things will get worse, and I'll work at it. I swear I'll come back. I'll come back.
Yeah, you could be recalled from your farms, to once again, but yeah. So Gulsher Qureshi follows up and says, the power of the platform exists to influence Trump himself and provide a 2024 connection point to run his campaign. Insane lead up to 2024. And yeah, man, obviously that is the power, right? It is Trump himself, right? He's going to be the main draw. A guy who had I think it's like 30 million something Twitter followers, obviously has the command and loyalty of a large section of the country. That's going to change things, right? That you're right about that. Does it do something significant to the nature of social media? Does it change the way social media works? Does it draw people who would not otherwise be on a right-wing platform to it? To some extent, it will, right? But the media can be on the platform and report on it like just a random Gmail account, right? Like I don't know. I guess it's just wait and see, I guess, is the answer. Again, I would never dissuade him from doing this, but it is an interesting we'll just have to see if he's able to pull it off. I hope he does. All right, so our last thing, let's go ahead and make everybody angry at us. So the Patriot Front March. For those who aren't aware, yesterday a couple, looks like under 200 guys in khakis and blue shirts marched in Washington, D.C. They had a bunch of American flags and kind of Retake America banners. There's a lot of masks, a lot of riot shields, knee pads, shirts. And I made a tweet, something to the effect of like, okay, it looks like the local field office is having a parade again. And that got some people worked up. I don't know a whole lot about Patriot Front. I've heard of them vaguely before, but to be honest, I'm just not super familiar with them. But a lot of people got, I shouldn't say a lot of people, wasn't a lot. Like the tweet wasn't even approaching getting ratioed or anything. Like it was maybe 30 vocal people about it, but there was some people who did not like that characterization of the event. So let me say this. I am not familiar enough with the individual people of Patriot Front to have any understanding of how sincere or their motivations. And I'm sure that a good percentage of them have nothing to do with, the government or anything else. Here's my point in making that remark. And my position on this has been the same for a very long time. You can go back and watch my video on the mold bug and the inactive imperative. That's one of my very earliest videos, and it's the same thing that people in New Year Reaction often catch a lot of heat for. It's very simply this, guys. When you go out and you inhabit the form your enemy wants you to take, you feed their narrative and you make it easier for them to hurt you. And there's two issues involved here, right? There's first, would there actually be informants or agents who would encourage people in these organizations to take actions? It would be one part of it. And two, are the actions themselves profitable? Of course, I don't know about any one individual person and this particular organization, but we have seen very clearly on a regular basis infiltration of these organizations and encouraging of these organizations in order to do dumb things, to do things that will get them in trouble, will ruin the lives of the people involved. This is not some isolated incident. It's not some thing that I made out of thin air. This has been something. From the Oath Keepers to the Proud Boys to January 6th, we have seen active participation by government agents or informants encouraging individuals to take illegal action that will ruin their lives. A lot of people say, well, this is creating the panopticon, or this is the Fed meme encourages inaction. Okay, but it's not a lie, right? Like, it's not being made up. Like, this is real, this is provable, this is documentable, and it happens on a regular basis. And if you're going to pretend it's not happening, you're pretend people aren't doing it, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think it's pretty obvious and speaks for itself. The second question is, even if every person in there is genuine and true, is this useful? Does marching around trying to look like a paramilitary organization do something positive for you and your goals in your movement? I don't see how, right? Like, these people are feeding the exact narrative to the media and to the government that they want. It gives them the exact visuals that they want. And it does so right on the heels of a major terrorist attack by a black supremacist that is being covered up by the media. So if you want to hand people a get out of jail free card, you just did it. Congratulations. I understand for some people this feels like inaction. This feels like advertising inaction. First, let me be clear. I'm not advertising anything. I'm not a leader. I don't have any connections with any groups or any of these movements. I'm a guy with a YouTube channel. But when asked, I will answer, and the answer is really simple. I don't see how this advances the causes that these people are interested in. I don't understand how this does anything but make these people subject to very dangerous situations, putting themselves in situations that can ruin their lives, making them the center of observation for these people, for people who are clearly going to want to do them harm. Why didn't any of the counter protesters that usually show up to these things show up? I don't know. Maybe they just didn't get wind of it. Maybe these guys had really, just didn't advertise it. But even if there is no encouragement by bad actors to do this kind of thing, I still think this type of action gains you nothing and costs you something. And if you're in a game to win, doing things that cost you something and gain you nothing are pretty much the worst possible decision you could make. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Ostrakon.
I mean, there's going around and parading around in DC, one of the most liberal cities, and the seat of power in the United States, seems like a pretty poor decision to make in general, right? You're what have you done? You've exposed yourself to unsympathetic media. You are providing the exact boogeyman that they're looking for, and we've talked about this before with Mencius Mulbug, and almost having to be an expat in your own country, right? You have to take a dispassionate look at the events happening around you, and and just look at it from an outsider's perspective in a way. And what is gained, like you say, what is gained and what is lost by an event like this? And there's very little gained other than, I guess, you are creating awareness for your organization, but at the expense of creating really bad awareness for your organization that is not going to put you in a flattering light. So I don't know the real purpose of, and it feeds right into the narrative that they're trying to produce, that it's just a bunch of evil right-wing extremists that want to murder people. So if you're if you're um, if you're leading this organization and you're legitimately trying to steer it in directions to promote your group, you're taking a very big miscalculation and doing this, or it's doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing, which was to create a organization that can act as a lightning rod for political malcontents. So I don't see it as useful in any way. At this point, the only way to win is not to play.
Yeah, and I've always been uncomfortable with the language that Moldbug uses there, expat in your own country, but at very least for analysis purpose, it has to be true, right? And like I said, it's a situation where there's about 1,000 things you could do to improve situations or raise awareness that aren't marching around uniformed with riot shields, and you're sending a very clear image, and you know what image you're sending. And if that's
You're sending a very brown shirt image.
yeah, and I don't think that's accidental. And
No.
and if this organization is genuine and was doing that on purpose, then the best thing you can say about them is they were doing something that wasn't that bright, out of I guess a genuine desire to do something. I just I don't think the mantra of just do something is healthy. It's dangerous. It gets a lot of people in serious trouble. I understand the concern about people saying, "Well, not doing anything is a big problem too." Once again, I want to make clear, like, I have no pretensions to, like, oh, I'm out here doing something really important. The real work is getting done on Twitter and YouTube. No, it's not, and I wouldn't claim otherwise. And I think it's foolish to do so. But I just notice a lot of people pushing these people to do this stuff are also just sitting on YouTube and Twitter, and they're not putting themselves in those scenarios. Not that they should be, not that I think anyone should be, but at the very least, I hope the message has been consistent. You can disagree with it, you can say that it's wrong. Fair enough. It's entirely possible that I'm incorrect, but I'm not going to tell people to put themselves in bad situations for what seems like no gain. And I don't understand why other people would do that.
2-3 months from now, it's going to come out that they were infiltrated the entire time and it was all encouraged. And once it's, left the news cycle, then it'll be revealed that, don't worry, the government was on the case the entire time. And there was no real threat. We had the situation well in hand, whether or not they did or not.
Yeah, it just seems like the intelligence agencies need these people to exist, and I don't. Anyway,
hey man, you gotta pay the bills somehow. You gotta justify your.
Or like you were saying, you got to zero out that budget before the end of the year, right? You can't leave anything in the line item.
Not to go back to, you guys remember Afghanistan, how we left, billions of dollars worth of equipment lying around. That is going to put intelligence organizations they're going to stay quite busy tracking down that equipment for the next 2 decades.
Yeah, that's a retirement program.
Yeah, it's just like at some point, it's whether or not these are manufactured events or if they've occurred organically. Either way, they are justifying the existence of these organizations in becoming more and more invasive into our private lives.
Yep. And guys, we're going to be wrapping up soon. So if you have any more questions you want to send, go ahead and get them in now, because that's the end of our scheduled topics. So if there's anything you want us to touch on here, I'm going to run down. I think there's a question or two left, but if you have anything and you want to sneak it in before we go, now's the time to do so. Truth Dweller says, do you see any hope in the gradual red pilling of progressives like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald, who also hate the neoliberal establishment? So here's the thing, and I actually just addressed this on another podcast that might be coming out soon. But I think that you can have these people as temporary allies, but they're never going to be true friendlies, right? And the problem is really simple. Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald, for all of the credit they should probably get for breaking away from what is very lucrative establishment contacts and doing their own thing and saying what they say. There is commendable bravery in doing that. But at the end of the day, their values are just fundamentally different from ours. They think that progressivism, they think that the left just went too far in the last like 10 years or something. And then don't get me wrong, like Jimmy and Glenn both have larger problems with like the security state and the military industrial complex that go back further than that. But at the end of the day, like all their values are left-wing values. Their only problem is that those organizations are not sufficiently left-wing. Or not, don't adhere to the appropriate version of liberalism that they've kind of enshrined. And so while I think that they can be useful in that they will bring their audiences into our sphere and they will make good arguments from different places that can buttress our arguments, I don't think that you're ever going to really see like nationalist Jimmy Dore or trad Glenn Greenwald. Like I don't think that's coming, and I don't think you should expect it to. You don't want to fall into the kind of the mainstream conservative trap of welcoming the newest batch of neocons and thinking that that's what's going to the left's finally gone too far and everyone's going to jump ship and come over here. And that's just probably not the case in the long run. Again, that doesn't mean that you push these people away entirely. Again, I think there is something valuably said to having the courage of your convictions on and being able to stand up when things go too far. But these people could have just gone along to get along and made a lot of money. But at the same time, I wouldn't expect them to become big forces on the right or get red pilled and truly understand what's going on, that kind of thing.
I don't know who they are.
Fair enough.
Sorry,
I've got no comment.
Okay.
Cool. Jimmy Dore was on the Young Turks. Glenn Greenwald is one of the journalists who was involved in a lot of things, including like I think Julian Assange and other WikiLeaks and all that stuff. So
so it was like one of the Young Turks is now shifted more right politically.
Not even really right. Jimmy Dore is not right. He's just he's in that like kooky enough left that hates like the military industrial complex and wokeness enough to like break away, even though he's still like pretty radically right wing or left wing rather.
Oh, okay. I don't remember much about the Young Turks. There's a big fat guy. I remember that.
Yeah. You really shouldn't. It's the only reason I think anyone thinks about the Young Turks anymore is to mock them. But
yeah, I don't remember much.
All right. Well, that said, we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's super chatting. I really appreciate your support. If you want to support me on Subscribestar, you can always find the link below. There's also like the merch store, and like I was talking about, make sure you subscribe to the Rumble and Odyssey channels, just so yeah, we just had another Twitter purge. You never know when the social media companies are just going to completely lock down. So if you want to have alternative places to find me, make sure that you're on those as well, so you can find everybody. Want to thank Ostrakon once again for coming on, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, always happy to put my 2 cents in.
And once again, guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate everybody, your support. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you're gearing up for a great Christmas. Stay positive, enjoy yourself, enjoy your time with the family and everything. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.